the same Democrats who have accused Donald Trump of lowering the standards of truth and fact, the same Democrats who say that Donald Trump lies on a routine basis about matters of policy, are worshiping at the altar of this brash new persona, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The reason that I bring this up is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was on 60 Minutes. Last week, she proposed what she called a Green New Deal. She also suggested that we should have racial and gender-based equity handled by the Congress of the United States, and that we should raise the tax rates radically. So she begins by pushing a 70% marginal tax rate. This is her big policy proposal, is that what we should do is we should pay for her Green New Deal, which, as I say, would cost tens of trillions of dollars by, you guessed it, taxing rich people more.
You have a progressive tax rate system. Your tax rate, let's say from $0 to $75,000 may be 10% or 15%, et cetera. But once you get to like the tippy tops, on your 10 millionth dollar, sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%. That doesn't mean all $10 million are taxed at an extremely high rate, but it means that as you climb up this ladder, you should be contributing more.
Okay, this is like watching my 4-year-old daughter explain basic addition to me. I mean that she has like a certain amount of kind of baseline understanding, but she doesn't really get it. I like that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is explaining to Anderson Cooper, who I promise you pays the top marginal tax rate. She's explaining how marginal tax bracket works to Anderson Cooper on national television. This is the new wave of the Democratic Party. You see, like, when you get up to like the very tippy top and the toppity tiptoes, and when you get to like the $10 millionth dollar, that's taxed at a different rate than like if you made $5. Yes, Alexandria, we know. And it's still immoral to steal 70% of a dollar that somebody makes for your own private purposes. Also, the notion that this is going to pay for virtually anything is nuts. She basically says, okay, if you make over $10 million, then we should tax all of that at a 70% rate. And one of my favorite things about this is that people in the Democratic Party are then repeating this. No, it's not that bad. Like, why would that be so bad? There's a thread on Twitter. This had 75,000 retweets from a person named Diana Anderson. I don't know who this person is. This person wrote, okay, so a lot of rich white folks are freaking out about what a 70% tax rate on the wealthy would look like. And they're scared about it and bleep, even though it's literally what rich baby boomers already dealt with. First of all, rich baby boomers did not deal with it. They had massive tax loopholes that were applicable during the Eisenhower era when the top tax bracket, starting at about $3.4 million jointly for households, was at 91%. The effective tax rate for those households was about 45%. Here's what this person says, though. They say, post-World War II, the tax rate peaked at 94% on annual income over $200,000. This is post-World War II, you will remember, when we were still paying off, a massive military spend. By the way, $200,000 in 1946 was like $3 million in 2018. In the decades following, it dropped to a marginal tax rate of 70% of all income over $200,000 annually. Yes, and if you'll recall, the 1970s sucked economically before Ronald Reagan massively cut the top marginal tax rate. Let's take an example of what would happen if we had a 70% income tax rate for people making above $10 million. So let's say you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. You made $65 million last year in 1 year. So that $10 million cutoff is going to hit you. 70% off everything above $10 million. That leaves you with $16.5 million. Wow, that's a big hit, you think. On paper, yeah, that's a lot of money to just give up in taxes. No, not on paper. In reality, giving up $45 million is a lot of money to give up. But this person says that rate still leaves The Rock with nearly $20 million, considering his $10 million is also taxed at a lower rate. That's $20 million in net pay for a year, which is still a lot of money. So what's The Rock whining about? Here's why this is so intensely stupid. The reason that this is so intensely stupid is because everyone will start using tax avoidance strategies. How do I know this? Because France tried to do exactly this. Okay, a few years back, let's go back in the Wayback Machine to like 2017, like 2 years ago. The Prime Minister of France was a guy named Edouard Philippe. Okay, and he had tried to impose, along with Emmanuel Macron, economic reforms that would have led to a massive wealth tax. And what happened? All the millionaires left France. In 2016, 12,000 millionaires immigrated from France. In 2015, 10,000 millionaires left France. It turns out, you know what rich people are really good at? Picking up and moving. It turns out that rich people, if you try to tax them at a 70% rate above $10 million, you know what they'll do? They will just sell their houses and leave and go live in Monte Carlo. If you think The Rock is sticking around to watch $40 million of his disappear every year so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez can pay off her green Solyndra supporters, You are out of your damned mind. You're crazy. It's not going to happen. And even the Washington Post basically acknowledges this. They do a full economic workup. This is my favorite part. I love this. This is what they say. They say, Ocasio-Cortez's suggestion for nearly doubling taxes on people earning more than $10 million would bring in $720 billion per decade, $72 billion a year. Except that, that's not what's going to happen. Here's it buried deep in this article from the Washington Post. The real number is probably smaller than that, because wealthy Americans would probably find ways around paying this much higher tax. You think? You think maybe The Rock just wouldn't do as many movies? I wouldn't work as hard if I knew 70% of my money were going to the federal government. Already an enormous amount of my money goes to the federal government. You think I would take on extra jobs just so I could pay the bills for the stupid ideas of our Congress people? There's something deeply immoral about stealing 70% of any dollar that anyone makes. And if you think that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez knows how to spend her money better than The Rock knows how to spend his money, I don't know what to tell you. I'm with Cardi B. I don't know what the government does with my bleeping money, and neither do you. And the fact that the federal government is now trying to seize that money and people are cheering this on is nuts. So this is the new Democratic push, is that they are going to massively raise taxes. Yeah, go with that. I also love the baseline lie that is being told here, which is that if you raise the top marginal tax bracket 70%, that's going to pay for everything. You crazy? It ain't. And people in Denmark are paying 60% of their income off the top in income tax if you make above $60,000 a year. You want to pay for Bernie Sanders-like programs, you can have Bernie Sanders-like taxes. And those Bernie Sanders-like taxes do not look like a top marginal tax bracket increase. They look like a massive middle-class and lower-class tax increase because you must expand the tax base. If you do not expand the tax base, you're not going to take in more income.